Hello and welcome to the Property Forum Chat Show with myself, Nicholas Woolwork, investor, developer and owner of propertyforum.com. On today's show, we'll be answering questions about HMO properties. So, are you considering an HMO investment, but finding the prospect of dealing with a larger number of tenants rather daunting? How can you avoid the problem tenants and protect yourself from those rental arrears? How do you source the ideal HMO property and renovate it to maximise your potential returns? If you haven't seen our show before, each episode is based around a different area of property investment. We take questions from our online forum and we post them to our expert panel here in the studio. If you'd like to get involved in a future episode of the show, please log online to propertyforum.com. You can create a username, it's completely free, and you can pose your questions online. If your questions don't make it onto the show, I'm sure one of our expert panelists will answer it online. We also have a forum membership of over 60,000 users, and they'll be able to impart their wisdom if that helps you. We hope you enjoy the show, and we'll see you online soon. If you're on the brink of stepping into the world of HMOs, you definitely need to pay attention to the advice of today's expert panel. We've got Phil Gardner, eviction specialist from High Court Solutions, and also Luke Masters, an HMO and property sourcing expert from Red Brick Property Services. Welcome you both to the show.
Thanks, thank you.
So as much as every landlord will thoroughly vet each potential tenant, you can never be certain they will pay the rent on time and not become a financial drain. The nature of HMOs means a higher number of tenants per household, plus a more frequent turnover of people. Does this automatically mean an increase in the issues for the landlord? Well, not if you're up to date with your rights as a landlord and are aware of the options available to you. Phil Gardner, please could you tell us a little bit of information about your company and its background and expertise in property evictions?
Certainly, I'd love to. So, High Court Solutions is by no means the largest company in the UK that does what we do. However, we are second to none in the success rate that we have for our clients. We do a number of services for our clients, but today we're talking about the eviction side of things and how we look after landlords when the tenants don't or won't pay, and what we can do in order to try and help get their property back and indeed the money that they may well be owed.
Definitely. Okay. Well, I think we should dive straight into the questions from the forum today.
Sure.
This first one is from Tim from Reading, and he asks, when does a buy-to-let become an HMO?
So a buy-to-let will transition to be a HMO. Typically, the start point on a smaller HMO would be 3 or more people sharing some communal amenities. So whether that's a kitchen or washing facilities, that's going to class you initially as a small HMO.
Okay, so when it sort of turns from a single family or a single person into multiple family units essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and there's also I think a larger HMO which is classed in planning law, which is when you have 5 or more tenants across 3 or more stories.
Correct.
And still sharing some sort of shared facilities, like kitchen and washing facilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we've got some questions here from Jackie from Birmingham, and she asks, what is a buyer's agent? And I think that's probably a good one for you again, Luke, if I may.
A buyer's agent, I would say, is really a gear for you to be able to purchase property when you perhaps don't have the time or the facility to enable doing it yourself, whether that's building the relationship with the local agents that have got the knowledge and the expertise to find you the right property.
Yeah.
And you're probably, generally speaking, somebody who's cash rich and time poor, and it's almost like hiring some help to build that journey for you and assist you in doing so. So you'd really give a criteria that was specific to a buyer's agent. Yeah. They would then go and work on that for you, do the viewings, put all the numbers together, get everything together for you, package it up nicely, where you can then make a decision on what you want to do moving forward based upon that.
Yeah, based on a refined set of properties. You don't have to do every viewing and whittle it down to...
No, you might have a selection of 2 and say, right, this is going to be your return on investment over 5 years on this, and this is going to be your gross yield. And then you take a pick on it, and it saves you a lot of time, and it's cost effective for you.
Definitely. Okay. Let's take another question. This is from Brian from Ireland. This one's for Phil. I've previously had a buy-to-let where I had a problem tenant, but it took me months to evict. I'm concerned that having an HMO might increase this risk because you're dealing with more individual parties.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. From an HMO's perspective, you've got the increase in yield and indeed the rents that you can receive. But of course, when things don't go to plan, you've then got individual tenants which each require an individual writ of possession to be drawn up. It has to go through the county court. And so, yes, you can have some additional costs and problems indeed surrounding that.
Okay, so it's really just the sort of volume of tenants you're likely to have in a portfolio of HMOs that would mean you're possibly more likely to have a bad tenant, really.
Well, that's right, because you're going to have a higher number of tenants going through those properties across the course of the year, student properties, for example.
Yeah.
And by the very nature, you're more likely to therefore have a bad apple in the cart, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think HMOs also represent, in my opinion, quite a low-risk investment. Whereas with a single let, if you have a tenant in there that you're trying to evict, you might be stuck with absolutely no rental income for that property.
Well, absolutely.
And struggle with your mortgage. Whereas an HMO, if you've got a 7 or 8 bed HMO, if you've got even 1 or 2 bad tenants, the rest are almost certainly going to supplement your mortgage and costs. So for me, it's quite a low risk investment strategy.
I think that's right.
So Steve from Sunderland would like to know, why is an HMO such a popular investment strategy? Direct that one at Luke to start us off as a specialist sourcer.
Really, it's going to be down to the income that you can make off it. That's probably the headline attraction.
Makes you more money.
Yeah, it's going to give you a bigger return.
A powerful factor.
You're going to have more money. As you mentioned, it's going to decrease your potential risk. You've got various different people within the property, and should you get a bad apple, you've got various different options to cover it.
And I guess as well, if you've got the HMO, then the other tenants that are paying the rent are going to not want that other person there because they're using all of the shared facilities and they're going to help keep the property in better order.
So it's almost self-managing.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And if you've got an individual property with a bad tenant, then there's every likelihood they're going to damage the property, not look after it properly. Whereas with an HMO, those people that are willing to pay are going to help make sure that property is looked after.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Good point. Okay, Sarah from South London would like to know, and this is one for Phil, I think. I have a similar question too. I own a couple of buy-to-lets, and one of my previous tenants left with quite a large sum of rental arrears, which took me a while to recover from financially. I'm also concerned about having similar issues with an HMO, especially as all bills are inclusive. I don't want to find myself in a position where 2 or 3 tenanted in a 5-bed HMO have stopped paying their rent. How can I best protect myself from these kind of issues?
Okay, so what we're finding and recommending is that landlords look for guarantors, and they might approach somebody who is a homeowner, that maybe it might be the mother or a grandfather or whatever, that can secure the exposure. And that way, if you do have a bad tenant, then we can approach the guarantor, who will be more than happy to then pass on the forwarding address so we can trace the tenant and try to get the matter resolved. Yeah. And in the worst case scenario, we could potentially go after the guarantor to get the money and get things sorted out.
Gives you sort of backup, really, to,
exactly.
to your original tenancy.
Yeah.
Just secures the money more efficiently.
We're finding this to be a very increasingly popular way for landlords to be protecting their investments, which ultimately is what it's about.
I think one of the most important things to do as a landlord is to act quickly, isn't it? And to get someone like yourself and your company involved at a very early stage to get that advice. You don't want to leave it months before serving the appropriate notices, because then those notices need time to sort of take effect, don't they? Really?
Exactly right. And with the closure of a lot of the county courts, we're finding that there's pressure on the system, and it can take 13 or 14 weeks for it to go through the county court system. All of that time you're not earning.
A long time.
The money is building up that you're potentially losing. And so it's important that, yes, you get people like ourselves involved at an early stage, and then we can help guide you through the process and make sure all of the correct paperwork is served as well.
Okay, brilliant. Let's have a question now from Perry from France. I'm considering investing in my first HMO property. What do I need to be aware of when I'm looking for the ideal property? I think I'll direct that one to Luke.
Yeah, I mean, you'll need to understand your demographic that you're trying to appeal to within the property. I would probably take it right back to the tenant that you're looking to attract before even thinking about the property.
Yep.
You need to think about the end user and who you want that end user to be.
What's your business model, really?
What are you looking for? Whether it's students, is it single professionals? Are you looking at potentially including some couples? What is your strategy and angle? And then you need to find an area which is going to fit that demographic.
Yep.
Because if you, for example, you are looking to do student accommodation, and then you buy something that's in the middle of nowhere, it's not going to be particularly efficient, and you're not going to have any tenants, which
need a good
not going to help you.
Very close, don't they?
Yeah, well, traditionally speaking,
strategy for
absolutely.
investments.
So picking not the right, but the tenant that you wish, and then picking the right property, an area that is going to facilitate having tenants within the property and not having it vacant would be the first point. And I would really probably also look at whether you're looking to achieve a yield-based investment or a capital growth, or whether you're looking for a mixture, and then look at targeting areas that either have a higher yield, if that's what you're looking for, or better potential for capital growth, if that's what you're looking for. Yeah. So you really need to weigh up your own financial situation and make a decision based upon that.
Yeah, okay. No, really good advice there, Luke. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree.
This is directed for the whole panel, I think. This is Paula from Newcastle. Do you think a higher level of tenant turnover will become a headache? We've sort of touched on that a little bit before. I think, time is a key factor in any investment. But, from your perspective, Luke, what do you think is the main concern you see from investors with HMOs? Or, how do you take the worry out of it for them?
I mean, the turnover of tenancies is obviously going to be higher. It's no different than owning, if you've got a 6-bedroom HMO, it's no different than owning 6 individual units, potentially.
True,
and the turnover will be very similar, potentially even higher.
You almost need to treat each bedroom unit as a separate
entity.
Flat almost.
Yeah, almost like a separate entity from that point of view. And yes, it can become a headache, but you have to weigh up the headache that you're potentially going to receive versus your return. And you can't expect to have a greatly increased income with not increased aggravation. The two don't come in correlation.
You don't get money for nothing, is that
correct? Exactly.
I work harder.
You might employ a managing agent, which you build a good relationship with, and then they look after the property for you and take the headache away. Or you might want to do it yourself, but I would certainly consider using a managing agent who has experience in managing HMOs and portfolios, and then they've got the experience to look after it. They know what they're doing, and they'll take the headache out of it for you.
Okay. I agree, and I think that to add to that, you need to go into it very well researched. People think that property investment in general is easy, and it's not. And HMOs are another level on. Yeah. And you need to make sure you've got all of your ducks in the row, if you like. I mean, we are aware of cases where landlords have not done things correctly, and then the local authorities will come down on them very hard because you've got lots of people living in one property. Yeah. You need to make sure things are spot on.
I've seen landlords put in eviction notices themselves and got the very slightest of details wrong, and
the
county court throws you straight out.
It will be, and if you're wanting to get it through the court, especially now, the system and the procedures have all been tightened up. So you need to make sure you keep good records. If you're going to do, Section 8, for example, through the county court, you need to then, at the same time, apply to have that be able to be transferred up to the High Court. You need to have it documented with a hardship statement as to why you need this to be done quickly. And a company like ourselves, for example, will help with that process, and we have agents that will attend the High Court to help get it through. So we don't leave anything to second chance.
That's all we've got time for. And after the break, we'll be coming back, deciding and discussing whether it's best to buy a ready-made HMO, take on and manage that, or whether it's better to start one for yourself from scratch.